You ate something about an hour ago, not a meal. A few almonds, half a cracker, the last 2 bites of something that was already sitting on the counter and did not belong to anyone in particular. You do not remember deciding on it. You remember your hand arriving, and then the taste being finished. Before that, there was coffee with something small beside it. Before that, whatever was within reach while the kettle worked. And in about an hour, with no decision made anywhere inside you, it will happen again. Something will be in your hand, and you will not have watched it get there. Follow your own hands through one ordinary day, and the shape becomes visible. The reach at the counter while you are still standing up. The bite taken walking to the car. The handful eaten with your eyes on a screen, over before you registered it as food. The thing lifted out of a bowl in someone else's kitchen without appetite, without attention, without any part of you having asked for it first. None of it is much. That is exactly why it stays invisible. You are not eating enormous amounts of anything. You would tell me, honestly and accurately, that you barely eat, and you would be right. This was never about how much. So answer a different question. When were you last hungry? Not restless, not bored, not standing in front of an open refrigerator at 9 in the evening looking for a feeling. Hungry. The real thing. The one that used to arrive with a clean edge on it and make ordinary food taste like an event. You are looking for it right now, and it is not there. Not today, not yesterday, not anywhere in this entire week. There is a blank where that memory should be, and until this moment, you have never once looked straight at it. Here is the part nobody says out loud. That blank is not proof that you are fine. It is not the reward for a body kept quiet, well managed, and given no trouble. It is the sound of something that stopped speaking. You did not lose your hunger. You talked over it. Every hour, for years, gently, and with no cruelty in it at all. Something arrived in your mouth before the sentence your body had begun could reach its final word. A voice interrupted often enough, eventually stopped starting sentences. It is still transmitting. Understand that before anything else here reaches you, it did not go quiet because it gave up on you. It went quiet because it has not been left undisturbed long enough to finish a single line. Let your hands stay empty for the length of this. Nothing in you will break in the next half hour, and something in you has been waiting a very long time for a room this quiet. There is a reason this reaches you in this particular season rather than 5 years ago. The field surrounding this planet has been thinning through the current stretch of acceleration, and a thinning field amplifies. Whatever was faint becomes legible. Whatever was buried under interference starts to surface, and that includes the signals running inside your own body. This is a narrow window in which interior transmissions become readable again, and windows of this kind close as quietly as they open. There is a threshold inside this phase, where a line that has gone dormant can still come back on its own. And on the far side of that threshold, it takes far longer and asks far more of you. The Arcturian Council does not open a channel for something small. They do not route a transmission because a habit has become inconvenient, or because a body has grown a little heavier or a little more tired than it was. They open a channel when a line of communication that was designed to carry something essential has fallen below the level where it can be heard, and the being it belongs to has stopped noticing the silence. That is the situation you are in. That is why this arrived today, in the same hour that your hand moved towards something you did not want. In Arcturian terms, what has happened to you carries a name: the law of the unanswered transmission. It is not poetry, it is engineering, and it states something simple and severe. A signal that is answered before it completes does not register as answered, it registers as interrupted. And any transmitter that is interrupted enough times will lower its own output to protect the channel it is broadcasting on. Not out of punishment, out of design. A line that keeps sending into interference reduces its amplitude until the interference stops. This is what you have been living inside without a name for it. Food that never fully lands. Meals that begin and end without ever registering as meals. A vague, low, ongoing dissatisfaction that follows you from the plate to the cupboard to the counter to the plate again. Never sharp enough to be called anything. Never absent long enough to be noticed. You have been eating constantly and receiving almost nothing, and somewhere along the way, you quietly decided the fault must be somewhere in your character. You decided you had no self-trust around food. You decided something in you was broken at the root, and you have carried that verdict privately for years without ever putting it into words, because putting it into words would have made it real. It is not your character. Your equipment is intact, and it always was. And there is something inside this that almost nobody catches, something you will need before this is finished. When a line like yours comes back online, it does not return the way it left. The first complete signal to arrive after years of interruption does not come as an ache in the stomach. It comes somewhere else entirely, wearing something else entirely, so unlike hunger that nearly everyone reaches for food straight through it, without ever knowing it arrived. Most people meet their own returning signal exactly once, in the 11th hour, and eat over the top of it. What you are inside right now is Arcturian frequency, and a transmission here does more than describe a thing. It opens the field it is describing, but an opened field does not hold itself open, because a channel stays live only where it is re-entered, written into, and returned to daily. So before anything opens in you, look honestly at what has already been happening in front of you. You finish a full meal. 20 minutes later, something is in your hand, and you cannot remember standing up to get it. The plate is still in the sink. Nothing in your body asked for anything. The reach happened without you, and by the time you noticed, it was already over. Then there is the question you cannot answer. When were you last genuinely hungry? Not a vague answer, an absence. You search the whole week for one clear instance of the sensation and find no record of it anywhere at all, as though the week were missing a sense. If something just moved through your chest as you read that week and found it empty, that was not discomfort, that was contact. And there is a number for the moment. A sealed line registers its first opening. Type 111 into the comment field now, while the recognition is still warm in you. 111 marks a gateway coming open for the first time. Send it before the feeling settles back down. You eat walking to the car, standing at the counter with your coat still on, holding the phone in the other hand. 10 minutes later, you could not describe the taste of it if someone asked you directly. And in the evening, the moment the kitchen finally goes quiet, a low restlessness comes up through the middle of you. One bite settles it. It stays settled for about 11 minutes. Then it rises again, and you meet it again, and the night goes on like that. You have always filed these as 4 separate problems. They are not 4. They are one line reporting the same fault from 4 different points along its length. Each one is the same interrupted signal trying another route, because the direct route is blocked, and the blank is the loudest of the 4. The blank is where the grief lives, because a blank means it has been a very long time. That blank is where the written work begins. It's not hunger, it's a signal, was written for this exact stretch, when the field is open and you cannot yet read what arrives. A 10-second check-in for which of the 5 languages speaks. 21 gentle days. A written prompt for the moment your hand moves, so the pattern becomes visible in writing instead of in verdict. It never asks you to eat less. When you are hungry, you eat. Link in the description. Pinned in the comments. This channel carries no advertising by choice, so nothing interrupts the field, and the written work is what keeps these transmissions coming. The line runs from the gut to the crown. That is its full arc, and it was built to carry more than one kind of message. Your body has never had only one thing to say. It speaks in at least 5 distinct languages, and hunger is only the first and most physical of them. Thirst has its own tone. Feeling has one. Rhythm has one. Depletion, the deepest of them, has one. All 5 travel that same line, and when the line runs clean, you can tell them apart the way you tell one voice from another across a room. The languages did not go away. It is that every one of them has been reduced to the same low murmur, and a murmur has no grammar. When every message arrives at the same faint volume, they blur into a single undifferentiated pull. And the only answer you have left for an undifferentiated pull is your hand. You have already done real work on this. You changed what goes on the plate, you read carefully, and some of it helped in ways that were genuine and worth keeping. None of that is being taken back. What we are opening works at a different depth and in a different way, and it stands alongside everything you already use, in addition to whatever care you already receive. This is simply the layer underneath, not because those approaches were wrong, but because they work on content, and this is a problem of timing. Here is the timing. Every time food enters, a current begins in the digestive field and does not fully clear for hours. The communication running between your gut and your brain was never built to compete with that current. It sends underneath it, at low amplitude, the way a faint station sends underneath weather. When something arrives every hour, that current never actually stops, and a message that never gets a clear stretch of quiet cannot complete its arc from the enteric field up through the solar plexus to the crown. It gets cut mid-transmission, every hour, for years, which means nothing in you needs repairing. The line reopens by itself, and what it requires is not effort, it is silence. Roughly 12 hours of it, unbroken, measured from your last bite of the evening to your first of the morning. Most bodies already have that stretch lying across the evening and the night. That is not a fast. Do not turn it into one. It is not a cleanse, not a detox, not a protocol, and there is nothing in it to pass or fail. It is a listening window, a room left quiet long enough for one full sentence to arrive intact. And if real hunger comes during that window, you eat. That is not a rule I am softening to make this easier to hear. That is the entire point of it. If the signal completes at hour 7, then the window did its work in 7 hours instead of 12, and you answer it, because answering it is the part that has been missing. The only thing being withdrawn here is the answering of a signal that was never sent, because the deeper mechanism is this: your receiver is not damaged, it is functioning perfectly, and it is sitting above its own noise floor. Let the weight of your body go down into whatever is holding you, and leave it there. That is the only instruction you will be given. Your hands can rest open, palms upward, empty, not as a symbol, simply so that nothing in them can be reached for while this moves. Breathe out once, longer than you breathed in, and let the end of the breath go where it wants to go. Now bring your attention down, below the ribs, above the navel, into the center of the abdomen. This is where the line begins. Do not look for a feeling there, look for a hum. There is a hum in that field. There has been for years. A low, continuous static of readiness, a field that is always slightly braced and always slightly occupied, never once permitted to arrive at empty long enough to hear itself. You know it the moment you find it, because it is the background of your days. Do not change it, watch it withdraw. It goes the way a tide goes out across a very wide and very flat beach, not suddenly. In long, slow pulls, each one uncovering ground that was always underneath the water. The static drops one level, then another. Layers you never knew, where layers lift and thin and go quiet, and beneath every one of them there is more room than you expected. Keep watching. The field is going darker and clearer at the same time, and the further it drops, the more obvious it becomes that the noise was never coming from anything wrong in you. It was coming from the constant answering. And then, low in that clearing, something small begins to show. A deep orange warmth, the color of carnelian held up against a lamp, steady, unhurried, older than every strategy you have ever built around food. That is the original fire. It has never once gone out. It has only been unheard, sitting patiently underneath a noise it did not make, waiting for the room to empty. Let it be seen. That is all it has ever wanted from you. Now watch what rises from it. A single thread of light lifts from that warmth and begins to travel upward, thin, precise, silver at the edges. It moves first into the solar plexus, and as it passes through, a plate of bracing you have carried there for years, without ever naming it, simply lets go. The thread does not force it. It passes, and the holding releases behind it, the way a knot releases when the tension leaves the rope. The thread continues up. It moves through the center of the chest, and the field there opens sideways to let it through. It reaches the throat, and here it slows. This is the place where the sentence has always been cut. Every time. For years, the light arrived here and something entered your mouth and the thread broke and fell back down into the dark. Watch it approach that place now, in a room where nothing is arriving. Nothing arrives. The thread passes through the throat, intact, for the first time in a very long time. And it keeps going, up through the back of the skull, into the crown. And at the crown it completes, and the whole line, from the deep orange fire in the abdomen to the point above your head, stands lit end to end at once. One unbroken circuit, not a new thing, a thing that was always there, connected again along its full length. Feel the fine, cool line that opens behind the sternum in this moment. That is not emotion, that is the current holding. If that just moved in you, do not let it pass unmarked. Type 888 into the comment field now. 888 is the frequency of a supply line coming back online, the moment two versions of your life converge, and the one where your own body feeds you becomes the live one. Send it while the line is lit. Now let it stay lit and do nothing at all. The circuit is retensioning itself. Every point along it is finding its correct pitch, the way a string finds tone as the tension comes up. You do not have to help. You could not help. This is a self-correcting system doing the one thing it has been unable to do while it was being spoken over. It knows its own pitch. It has always known. And as it tunes, the field around your body takes on a pale cast, silver going faintly blue, the color of moonstone under shallow water. This is a receiving color. It comes up in the field only when the array underneath is listening rather than transmitting. Let it come up around you now, and let yourself be nothing but the room it fills. Tonight, when everything in the house has settled and no more is arriving, this quiet is where the line will be. Not because you are doing anything, because nothing will be interrupting it. And somewhere far into that quiet, in the 11th hour of it, with nothing entering to cut it short, the first complete sentence your body has spoken in years will begin to move up the line toward you. It will not sound like hunger, and it will not arrive anywhere you are watching. One thing before the mechanism, because you stayed. What opened in you is real, and a new line needs somewhere to be written down daily, or it narrows again. The description holds it. So does the pinned comment. Now back to the line. Every receiving system that has ever been built, on this world or anywhere else, runs into the same wall. It cannot resolve a faint incoming signal while it is generating louder noise of its own, not because the signal is weak, because the system is loud. The Arcturians have a name for the point where that changes, and it is the most practical piece of knowledge in their entire body of work. They call it the silence threshold of the receiving array. An array is not a single instrument. It is a field of receivers working together, each one tuned slightly differently, each one contributing to a picture no single receiver could produce alone. Your body is one of these. The enteric lining, the vagus, the solar plexus, the heart, the crown. All of it is one array reading one field. And like every array, it has a threshold, a specific level of internal noise below which the faint stops being noise and becomes language. The Arcturians study this threshold in starseeds more closely than they study almost anything else, and the reason is simple. Every capacity you have been told is rare, every form of inner knowing that gets described as a gift given to some and withheld from others, turns out on examination to be the same ordinary faculty operating below threshold, not a rarer receiver, a quieter one. The difference between a person who knows what their body is saying and a person who has no idea has almost nothing to do with sensitivity and almost everything to do with noise. Above the threshold, the array hears only itself. Below it, everything is audible. The threshold is not something you reach by trying harder. There is no intensity that gets you there. It is reached by subtraction only, by the removal of the noise the array itself is making. And this is the part that changes how you will hear everything from here. Because there is one more law inside the array, and it is absolute. A receiving array cannot transmit and receive in the same instant. No system can. The moment it begins generating, its receiving capacity collapses to nothing, and it stays collapsed for as long as the generating continues. This is not a limitation of biology. It is a property of how signal works anywhere in this universe. Now put your life against that. Count the openings in an ordinary day of yours. The first thing before the day has properly started. The thing beside the coffee. The mid-morning something. The thing at the desk. The thing on the way. The thing while you cook. The thing after. 6, 8, 10 separate moments where the array is thrown back into output, spaced so evenly across the waking hours that there is never a gap wide enough for the switch to fall the other way. When something enters your mouth, your array begins generating. A current starts in the enteric field, the whole system moves into output, and for the duration of that output, it is deaf to itself, not damaged, deaf. And the moment the output begins to fade, before the array has ever crossed back below its threshold, something else arrives and the generating starts again. That is what your last several years have actually been. Not a body that stopped speaking to you. A body locked in permanent transmit mode, unable to switch into receive even once, because the switch only throws in silence, and there has been no silence. There is a physical correlate to this, and it is measurable. The vagus, the long nerve that carries the deep state of the body upward toward the brain, cannot drop into its lowest and most communicative gear while digestion is running. It simply cannot. That gear is reserved. It opens only when the digestive current has genuinely finished, not slowed, not settled, finished. And in a system that receives something every hour, it never once opens across an entire waking life. The message that has been trying to reach you was always routed through a channel that was structurally unavailable. So follow what happens across a stretch of real quiet. The first hours are nothing. The current is still clearing. Nothing has changed and nothing will seem to. Somewhere around the 6th hour, the noise floor begins to drop, and you will not notice this either, because a floor dropping produces no sensation. It produces absence, and absence announces nothing. By the 8th hour, something faint begins in the background of your attention, and most people misread it immediately as tiredness and go to bed, which is exactly right, because bed is where the rest of this happens. By the 9th hour, the array is close. The generating has stopped. The vagus has begun its descent. The receivers, all of them, are quietly coming up into a sensitivity they have not held since you were very young. And then, somewhere in the 11th hour, the array crosses its threshold and flips. Here is what that flip actually feels like, and I want you to hold this precisely, because you have almost certainly felt it before and thrown it away. It does not arrive in your stomach. There is no ache, there is no growl, no hollowing, no pulling sensation anywhere below the ribs. That is the entire reason it goes unrecognized. You have been trained your whole life to look for hunger in one location, and it does not come to that location. It arrives high, behind the sternum, in the middle of the chest, and slightly up into the base of the throat. And what it feels like is a sharpening. A clean one, the kind where the room seems very slightly more defined than it was a minute ago, where sounds separate from each other instead of blending, where your thoughts stop overlapping and start arriving one at a time, in order. There is a lightness across the top of the chest, an unexpected sense of having more interior room than you are used to having, and underneath it, faintly, a kind of alert steadiness that feels almost like being younger. And it is not the alertness of stimulants. There is no edge on it, no acceleration, nothing rising in the pulse. That is the tell. Stimulant clarity pushes. This clarity opens. Your eyes feel slightly wider without being widened. Your attention rests on one thing at a time and stays there without effort. Everything in you gets very slightly quieter and very slightly more available at once, and there is a distinct impression, hard to describe and unmistakable once you have caught it, that something arrived rather than something started. That is it. That is the signal. That is your body finishing a sentence it began years ago, and it lasts somewhere between 90 seconds and 4 minutes. Then it withdraws, not because you did anything wrong. A completed transmission does not repeat itself immediately. It delivers, it confirms, and it goes back down to wait for the next opening. If you were not looking directly at it, you will have no memory of it 10 minutes later. And when it is received, when you simply notice it and let it stand without moving, the line registers something it has not registered in years. Delivery confirmed. The next transmission comes through a little sooner and a little louder. because a channel that gets acknowledged raises its own output. That is the only training this system requires. Now you understand why almost nobody receives this. It arrives disguised as the last thing on earth you would interrupt. It does not feel like a need. It feels like capability. It feels like focus arriving, like a second wind, like calm settling in for no reason, like the good stretch of an evening. And so you do the most natural thing a person can do with a sudden clean clarity. You use it. You keep working. You keep moving. And at some point in the using, without any drama at all, you eat something, and the array flips straight back into transmit, and the sentence that had finally completed is erased before it was ever read. There is a physical reason it wears that particular disguise. When the digestive current finally stops for long enough, the body switches which fuel it is running on. That switch is not a hardship, and it is not a stress event. It is a gear change, and the gear it changes into is famously clean, steady, and clear-headed. That clarity is not a side effect of the signal. It is the carrier the signal rides on. The message and the brightness arrive together, in the same wave, at the same moment, which is exactly why the brightness gets noticed, and the message underneath it does not. You have felt this. Some evening, some long afternoon, some morning, you got busy and forgot yourself. There was a moment where everything got quietly sharper and you thought, without examining it, that you were simply having a good hour. That was not a good hour. That was your body reaching you. If that just landed, mark it. Type 333 into the comment field. 333 is Trinity alignment, the moment three separate systems come into the same phase and the cells begin recalibrating to the corrected reading. Leave it now, while the recognition is still whole. So the answer to the thing that has been sitting underneath this entire transmission is not complicated. The signal was never broken. It was never even faint. It has been arriving at full strength into a receiver that was generating too much noise to resolve it, and on the rare occasions the noise dropped far enough for it to come through. It arrived in a form you had no training to recognize, in a place you were not watching, for a length of time short enough to miss, wearing a disguise so convincing that you thanked it for the energy and then ate over the top of it. That is the whole mechanism. Nothing in you is broken, nothing has to be rebuilt, and nothing has to be forced. An array that crosses below its own threshold begins receiving automatically. It has no choice in the matter. It is simply what an array does when the room finally goes quiet. Stay where you are for a moment longer. Most people who began this transmission are not here. That is not a judgment on them. It is simply what happens when something asks for more attention than the hour usually allows. You gave it. Whatever brought you this far, whether it was the blank you could not fill in or something older underneath it, it was strong enough to keep you in the chair, and the field around you now is not the same field it was 30 minutes ago. That is the part worth carrying out of this room, and it is worth handling as carefully as anything else you own. Now here is what to do with it, and there are only 4 things. The first is the quiet itself. Hold it for the 4 quiet stretches between your last bite and your first. 4, not forever, not as a way of living, not as something you are now supposed to be. 4 stretches of unbroken evening and night, beginning at whatever hour your last bite naturally falls, ending whenever you first eat in the morning. Nothing has to be moved, arranged, or planned around. If it runs 11 hours one night and 13 the next, that is the shape of a real life, and it changes nothing. And if real hunger arrives inside one of those stretches, you eat. That has not been softened, and it will not be. You are here to receive the signal, not to prove anything by refusing it. The second is the hour of the reach. When your hand moves on its own, let it. Do not intercept it, do not correct it. Do not make a small private ruling about yourself afterwards. Just note the hour it happened, nothing else. 4 days of hours written down will show you a shape that no amount of thinking about it ever would. And that shape belongs to your field, not to anyone's general advice. You may find every reach lands inside the same 2 hours of the day. You may find it clusters around one particular room, or one particular kind of hour. Whatever it shows you, it will be specific, and specific is the only thing you can work with. The third is the 60 seconds before your first bite of the morning. Put the food in front of you and do not begin. Let a full minute pass. In that minute, ask which of the languages is speaking, and then stop talking and wait for the answer to come from somewhere lower than your mind. It may be hunger, it may be rhythm, the day wanting to start. It may be depletion wearing hunger's coat. You are not trying to get the answer right. You are reteaching a line that asking is now part of the exchange. The fourth is the 11th hour. If the sharpening comes, and in these 4 stretches it very likely will, do nothing with it for 2 full minutes. Do not eat. Do not decide anything. Do not immediately put the clarity to work on a task, which is the reflex you will feel most strongly. Just let it finish arriving and stand there with it. 2 minutes of witnessed arrival does more for this line than anything else available to you. And the first night it comes on its own, when you feel that clean, high sharpening behind the sternum, and you recognize it while it is happening, come back to this transmission and leave the word quiet below, so the field knows it landed. There is a written practice for holding this between transmissions, where the 4 days become something you can read. Now take this in and let it settle where it belongs. You are not someone who cannot be trusted around food. You never were. You are someone whose signal was answered so fast, so kindly, and so consistently that it eventually stopped bothering to finish, and everything you called a failure of yours was a receiver doing exactly what receivers do in a loud room. You are an array. You were built as one. The sensitivity you have quietly considered a flaw in yourself is the equipment, and it has been running at full capacity this entire time with nothing to resolve. You are already receiving. That began tonight, not somewhere in the future when you have done this well enough for long enough. And the voice you have been unable to hear is not gone, was never gone, and has never once stopped speaking to you. It has simply been waiting for a room this quiet, and you have just built one. Something in your field has already changed position, and it happened during the meditation, not during the explanation. The static that has been running in the center of you for years has been shown to itself. That is irreversible in a small way. A noise that has been named cannot go fully back to being invisible, and from tonight forward, you will catch yourself hearing it in the middle of an ordinary afternoon for no reason at all. That is not a symptom. That is the array reporting its own condition, which is something it has not been able to do until now. Let it report. You do not have to act on any of it. Noticing is the entire instruction, and noticing is already underway. Over the next several days, you may find the quiet slightly uncomfortable before it becomes welcome. That is normal, and it passes. A field that has been continuously occupied does not know at first what to do with room. Let it be strange. Do not fill it. The strangeness is the sound of space returning, and by the 3rd of your 4 stretches it will have stopped feeling like absence and started feeling like width. Nothing is sold into these transmissions, and no advertisement will ever cut across one, because the written work is what carries them. Tomorrow a new transmission opens, and it goes to the next layer down. Once the line is running clean, your body begins to refuse things quietly, without announcement, and there are 7 in particular that almost every starseed starts turning away from before the mind has agreed to anything. That refusal is evidence. It proves a shift completed in you at a level you did not authorize and cannot undo. And tomorrow we read what it proves. Come back for it. What you built tonight is what makes that one legible, and it will not land the same way for anyone who has not done what you just did. But do not leave yet, because there is something on your screen right now that belongs to tonight. There is a craving that arrives at the same hour every single evening, regardless of what was on the plate at dinner. Regardless of whether the meal was large or small, or exactly what you wanted. Same hour, every night, almost to the minute. If you have ever noticed that and assumed it meant something about your appetite, it does not, and the transmission on your screen now explains what that hour actually is, and what is being timed by it. That one is already open. Go to it directly from here, while the line in you is still lit and still receptive, because the 2 transmissions were built to be received in this order. The room is quiet now. Keep it that way for a while. Nothing is required of you tonight beyond leaving it undisturbed. And listen, something has been waiting a very long time to finish a sentence.